people are allowed to stay in Ireland on humanitarian grounds. So the International Protection System is governed by the International Protection Act 2015. So when somebody arrives, say, from Zimbabwe or Nigeria or Iraq or Afghanistan, when they arrive in Dublin Airport or Dublin Port or Rosslare Harbour or any of those ports of entry, they can claim asylum there at the airport, or else if you come in through Belfast and come down through Northern Ireland, you can go straight to the International Protection Office, which is Mount Street, and you claim asylum. So you fill up a very short form. You're given a card, and you're given accommodation there and then. So mainly, people are sent to Balseskin in Dublin when they arrive first. So you've started off your first phase of seeking asylum or seeking international protection. So after you've claimed asylum, you've formally claimed asylum, you're given a detailed questionnaire. Now this questionnaire, it contains 90 questions covering all aspects of a person's life. So it looks at their personal life, where they were born, where they went to school, their parents' names, their siblings' names, if they're married, have they got children, what's their religion, where have they worked, when did they work there, what's their religion, what's their spouse's religion. It looks at where they have traveled to before, and then the main part of it is the reasons that they're seeking asylum. So they have to give a detailed account in writing, and it can often be a couple of pages long, as to why they're seeking asylum. So they go through their actual story about what happened to them. They also have to write in if they've got any medical reports, if they were beaten in any way, if they made any reports to the police. So the more documentation that they have, the better. They also give details of how they travel to Ireland, because there's another system known as the Dublin Tree Convention, whereas if you, say, arrive in the UK first and you're fingerprinted there, that you have to claim asylum in the UK as opposed to claiming asylum in Ireland. So to fill out this form, this questionnaire it's 90 questions. It's in several different languages. So, you know, if English isn't their first language, they can fill it out in, there's a huge amount of languages that the form can be filled out in, and they just translate it. And people are given legal aid during the asylum process. So people are advised really to get legal assistance when they're filling out the questionnaire. It's a hugely important document. So after the questionnaire is gone in, they have a month to submit the questionnaire after claiming asylum. So when the questionnaire is sent in, they are obviously living in direct provision, and the first part of their application then is a substantive interview. Now this can be anytime. There's no set criteria as to when it's held. Some people have been here for 2 months and they've had their substantive interview. More people have been waiting 18 months for a substantive interview. Again, it really depends on how busy or how many applicants there are at any particular time. So that substantive interview, that is the first interview they have with the Department of Justice. There's just the applicant goes to Mount Street, where the International Protection Office is, and they're interviewed by somebody from the Department of Justice. The interview is more or less based on the questionnaire that is submitted. The questions are more or less the same. And what they're trying to do is just to establish that the story is credible. So it's not a combative style of an interview. It's not meant to be combative or meant to be aggressive. It's just someone asking questions, and the interviewer has a set list of questions that they ask. So they ask the questions, and the applicant can give the answers as best they can. And if they need an interpreter is present. So again, as I said, in the interview, people are asked questions on, you know, all aspects of after life. It's the same as what came up in their questionnaire. I think one of the issues people have, if they have a traumatic story, you know, if they had been, you know, assaulted or imprisoned or tortured, if they lost family members, they are retelling their story, so it can be traumatic for people, and they've also had to write down the story in their questionnaire, so they're telling their story again here. So it can be difficult in that sense. Those interviews normally take about 2, sometimes they can take 3 hours. Obviously, if you have an interpreter, it can take a little bit longer, or if the story has a lot of detail or is more complex, it can also take a little bit longer. So once you've done your interview, then it takes about 3 or 4 months to get a decision. And then now again, this is an average. Sometimes you can get a decision after a month, sometimes it can be 6 months. So again, it depends on, really how complex the story is, how much documentary evidence is there, how busy the actual person who has interviewed them is, because they might have had a plethora of cases that particular week. So if they get a positive decision, they're granted refugee status if they qualify under any of those grounds, or if they don't get refugee status, they may get subsidiary protection. And if they get neither of these, they may be granted permission to remain on the first hearing. If they get a negative decision from their first interview, then they have the option to make an appeal for refugee status. That's RS is refugee status. I should have put in refugee status, and SP is subsidiary protection. So they can make an appeal to the International Protection Appeals Tribunal. Now, this is an independent organization, and that office is also in Dublin. So you've got a negative decision, you're making an appeal, you go to what's called, we know it as the IPAT, International Protection Appeals Tribunal. And again, the appeal date can be 3 to 6 months down the line from when you've got your decision. So you've put in your questionnaire, you're waiting maybe months to get your interview, you've had your interview, you get your decision after 3 or 4 months. Then when you get your decision, you decide whether or not you want to appeal. So when you appeal, again, you can be waiting 3 to 6 months to get an actual appeal date. So you can see why people are spending so long in indirect provision, because they're given the volume of people that are applying for asylum. I suppose given the shortage of people who are actually doing the hearings, or given the amount of hearings that you can actually do in any particular week, it does take time. So the appeal hearing is called the IPAT hearing. This can take about 2 hours. I've been in hearings that have taken maybe 3 or 4 hours. And again, a hearing might take 1 hour, might be pretty short. So in those appeal hearings, now they are, you're not in a court, you're just in an ordinary room. There's a table. I'm sitting at one side with the person seeking asylum and our interpreter. At the other side of the table, there's someone from the Department of Justice who's known as a presenting officer. And then at the top of the table, there's a chairperson known as the tribunal member. You don't wear court, you just dress formally, the suit. We don't wear court gear or anything like that. And again, it's not meant to be a combative experience. The idea is that the person seeking asylum tell their story as best they can. So at that hearing, you have the applicant, their lawyer, the chairperson, someone from the Department of Justice, and the interpreter. So what happens at those hearings is I'll take my client through their actual story and ask them questions about where they're from, about their family, about why they came to Ireland. So we go through the story from start to finish, and they'll tell their story, and I'll guide them through it as best I can. And if there's an interpreter, we'll use an interpreter. Then the person from Department of Justice will do a very short cross-examination, just try to clarify some issues. There's often issues of credibility, or of conflict in story, so they'll be asked to explain those discrepancies. And again, the decision for the appeal can take 2 to 3 months. So again, if it's positive, they're given refugee status or subsidiary protection, and if it's negative, they can get a review of their permission to remain, take a judicial review to the High Court, or obviously they'll have to leave the state or get a deportation.